right next to DC, and is an editor for Pro Farmer, and I'm amazed every morning about 7:30 I get an email, his daily emails, and there's about 5 pages of what's going on in ag and what's going on in the world that you need to pay attention to. So I don't think there's anybody that gets up earlier or has a better feel for what's going on in the ag world than Jim. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you. You know, I've said over the years, this is my 51st year, by the way, covering the business of agriculture. All great men are dead, and I don't feel well myself, okay? I've been to Fargo, northern Minnesota over the years, and I've always said when you come to your great locations in January or February, if it does anything, it builds character, okay? And the people who are here want to be here. And your warmth is always appreciative. You know, when I came from Fargo last night, of course it was a delayed flight. I sat next to a guy from Minnesota. I told him I was going to speak to you all. And he said, well, you ought to tell him what I told my wife. And I said, oh? He said, yeah, I told her when I pass away, I want you to get 6 current members of the Minnesota Vikings at my funeral so they can let me down one more time. I'm going to go through a lot. I do want to leave time for questions, because if you don't ask me questions, I'll ask you questions. And I'm going to go through a lot, okay? Some things of what's happening now, but even more so the future. But the future in our industry, I'm telling you, it's robust. It's good. It's positive. You may not feel that sometimes of what's going on dramatically in our country, and I'll tell you some of the reasons why. Because this is how it is right now. I mean, this is just bewildering of what's going on in our country and in the world. Now, Luke gave an excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it. When he was talking geopolitics and what's happening around the world, I was a history major actually in college many decades ago. And what's happening right now, to me, we started World War III in a different way. People don't realize it. The world is dividing right now in sectors. You're seeing it. China, Russia, Iran, Mideast, the US, Europe, etc. These are heady movements. And don't get too down on the US because one thing that separates our great country in the past and definitely now in the future is innovation. We have the entrepreneurship, and you're going to see it flex. You're seeing it flexing, to use a gerund, especially in the agribusiness industry. And some of that is what I'm seeing right now. I think it was mentioned, you know, CHS was mentioned earlier this morning. I was at a meeting in December in Newton, Kansas. I've done the meeting 12 years in a row. It's the best wheat meeting, by the way, I attend each year, wheat cattle meeting. And by the way, you're going to have a pretty big increase in wheat production this year if the weather people there are correct, because they're seeing at least adequate precip for that HRW area over the next year. But they had a person there from CHS, and it was one of the best speeches I've heard in many years, and I've heard a lot of them. And it wasn't just pie in the sky of what CHS, and I know other companies in the agribusiness industry must be doing it or want to do it in the years ahead. But the technology that's here right now in the agribusiness sector of the driverless trucks, greater efficiency. What the agribusiness sector is doing, they're not waiting for Washington to figure out this labor market or the immigration market. they're trying to fix it themselves, and they'll succeed when you get the industry people doing it themselves. Also, they have a war room, literally like a market wall room. If this room had TV monitors around the whole thing, they have that right now at CHS headquarters, where they can spot barges going down the Mississippi River, where they're at specific locations. So they know when they'll have to unload at a particular time, rather than to send labor at a particular time where they had to guess in the past. Think about that. That actually saves money. So as this gets more and more, they get the data and the technology further improves, this is going to make us more competitive. And one thing where I would disagree with Luke is, no, I think we're going to continue to be very export oriented in the decades ahead because of those things. We're going to rival again the competitiveness of almost any other country, including Brazil, as we get more and more data, and also these young kids coming from schools, from the universities, data analysts, who know how to use the reams of data that's coming in from you all in the industry. And I could go on and on. Digitization, where it used to take more than a few people in agribusiness companies to do the paperwork, that's being digitized now. You know, look at the savings there. And this is, again, not pie in the sky, it's here now. U.S. economy, some bottom line stuff. I think we had the worst Federal Reserve I've seen in my 50-plus year career. Why? They got too political. Remember when a year ago they said inflation was transitory? They were wrong. Do they ever shop? I wonder, did they ever go to a supermarket and actually shop? Do they get their own gasoline at the stations? And do they ever buy stuff for themselves? They should have realized what was going on. So what they did is they put us into a hole. Now to restore their credibility, they're having to accelerate the interest rate increases, probably to the point that it will eventually tip us into a recession. But a recession I'm not worried about. The question still is, how deep will it be and how long will it be? And Luke talked about that. It may be a short-term recession, but we're having to deal with that. The key to interest rates is the market's talking about a pivot. When will the Federal Reserve begin decreasing interest rates? They're saying right now it won't be any month this year. But the futures market is called futures for a reason. Once the Fed stops increasing, then it looks like they'll probably go 6, 7, 10 months of holding just to see. But once the bond market and the financial markets realize that the next move is down, there is your turn in the financial markets. So I don't know what it will be, but I know that's what the best thinkers that I know are telling me. China, big things going on. You know, there was a time here not too long ago when everybody thought, boy, this Xi Jinping, their leader, he's not doing anything wrong. Well, he fouled up too. His zero COVID policy was a big mistake. And they're pivoting to use that term again. And you get China coming back into the world market. That's big from a demand perspective over in China, and also their economy, because more than a few emerging markets count on China. So that gets you into the world market economy. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. It's just like weather patterns. It takes time. But the movement is there. But the other one is China was getting pretty belligerent, cocky, if you will, and getting pretty aggressive towards the U.S. and other countries. They're even pivoting on that because they're seeing their investment coming into the country, and the stoppage of the U.S. and the EU and other Western allies in the chip industry was weakening, and they got more than a little concerned. So they're pivoting, so now we're going to see the smiling China here. I don't know how long that will last, but you're seeing it. So that's a good thing from a geopolitical perspective. So I think we're getting building blocks here. Now on their involvement with Russia, he's hooked at the hip with Putin, by him being Xi Jinping. Several things going on there. Yeah, this is a proxy war that's going on in Ukraine. We're testing a lot of different things out in Ukraine. It's a testing ground, and so is Europe. Russia, not so much. But there's a phrase going on right now that there's a hot war going on in cold space. There is your world war going on right there. The thrust of who's going to get the next big chip development to fight the war from above. And that's why you have people like Elon Musk that is so important. Look at his Starlink satellite that's changed the development of that Russian invasion of Ukraine, February the 24th, it started, because it allowed some flexibility on the part of the US and Ukrainians to get movements, weapons, monitoring, etc. So again, this is big, heady stuff. You can do cyber warfare that way. Now, I rarely get into conjecture too much, but when it came to my delayed flight, yesterday, of course I picked the one day that we had a national outage to get here, okay? And I look at comments. When it first came out, and Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, the media darling of the liberal press, they want him to be the next president, by the way, he said he really didn't know what happened. That was confidence on my part. And then he told the president, who asked him, was there any chance of a cyber attack on that? And he said they didn't think so. I'm not going to rule that out, but I'll tell you, our government would never tell us it was a cyber attack. But I'm not discounting it whatsoever, because testing is going on by China, Russia, Iran, of our infrastructure. These are big, heady things that are going on. That's what my history majors are telling me to watch. But you get this China economy going on the uptick again, and it'll change a lot of flows again in the world communities on the economic front. I've already talked about the another industrial revolution going on in the business of agriculture. I mentioned about 90% of all drones in the U.S. are in agriculture. You know, think about all these the grain bins and the elevators. At that meeting I told you about in Newton, Kansas, the CHS guy showed the drones flying, looking at potential cracks in their elevator systems, and saving so much time and money versus years before where you had to climb and fix it. Just think through that stuff. Just put it all together. And it's making a lot of sense right now. And it goes on and on. So if you get down, there's a lot of money. And this is why investment money is flowing into our industry, because it's protein. If you produce anything in protein, you're into the biggest bull market over the next few decades, especially if you have the rise of the rest outside of this country. And Luke mentioned it. I'm giving you some of the things that's in my follow-up charts, but it makes sense to tell you now. Soybeans. There's going to be an acreage battle this year and definitely in the years ahead, where corn's going to have a big corn. That's why Illinois coming back at me, corn. Acreage battle for the years ahead, because we're going to fundamental change, a mega change is currently underway in this great country. We're going to increasingly be crushing for oil rather than meal. And why is that? The need for oil. It ties into energy policy. Luke mentioned it. Renewable diesel. Sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. And it's not just because of the Renewable Fuel Standard program. It's a result of also the state programs like California, Washington, Oregon, California wannabe states, Washington, Oregon, etc., that are increasing the need for renewable diesel. Now, what's the livestock component of that? We're going to have a lot of meal floating around here in the next few years. So, and the cattle industry knows that. They got low numbers now, they'll eventually rise, and they're going to have a robust amount of meal to go through. So this is where you got to connect dots, is how I would write it for ProFarmer. There's some mega trends going on that I don't think are going to change. And why is sustainable aviation fuel important? This taxpayers, I would never say U.S. government is paying. Taxpayers are paying billions of dollars for climate change, carbon mitigation. Now the airline industry is going to need carbon offsets. They're looking at the sustainable aviation fuel as a godsend for them because they're going to purchase a lot of it with incentives from American taxpayers through the legislation already approved for incentive payments to buy sustainable aviation fuel. So you can see this going on. Yeah, it won't happen robustly in a year or so, but it's going to build. Why are all these companies, ADM, CHS, Cargill, Bunge, why have they either announced new processing plants in soybeans for soybean oil or expanded current facilities over the last 18 months to the degree that Luke showed you on his charts? These people are pretty smart of all these companies that I just mentioned. They're seeing the development on this. And whether or not the Environmental Protection Agency is trying to soft pedal renewable diesel, and they are. Inherently, they're worried about the food versus fuel. They're asking for public comments in the Federal Register relative to renewable diesel. But the industry won't stop just because of EPA. So again, these are, I've never seen a time in decades that some really big things are in the process of going on. Crop insurance, since ProAg is crop insurance, there's some things that's going on here. Risk Management Agency is implementing equitable relief for specialty crops that was included in that omnibus spending bill. That's expanding the crop insurance program. That's a good thing because as you spread the worth of the crop insurance industry, it makes that much more a sustainable program. And the current Senate Ag chairwoman is Debbie Stabenow. She has more than a few specialty crops in the state of Michigan, cherries, etc. When I leave here, I'm going out to Yakima, Washington. Trust me, it's been the hardest flight pattern I've had to deal with in years to try to get to Yakima. Okay, from Fargo, it's hard. But I'm going to talk to cherry growers there because they want to know what's going on with trade policy. Before COVID and the China flare-ups, they exported 3.5 million boxes of cherries to China, where now they're down to 1 million boxes and going lower. So they want to know trade policy. You should too, because it's that important. But AIPs, I say, should pass this on to specialty crop agents because I'll tell you, crop insurance agents, ProFarmer each December has the Ag Person of the Year, and they were in close running, but crop insurance agents were almost the people of the year, and I don't say that lightly. Along with seed company representatives, I think you trust those two entities the most, that you rely on them. And crop insurance agents have done an unbelievable job over the past few years of having to deal with, without being paid overtly, to help you understand the WIP Plus, ERP, etc. So these are some of the things going on within the crop insurance industry. Administrative and operating expenses. You may not hear much about this, but it's been frozen for too many years. And in this omnibus bill, lawmakers told USDA to provide indexing for inflation for all administrative and operating expenses. And I think it's much needed to keep that crop insurance industry as whole as it can get. Ad hoc disaster. This is a sensitive issue because look at how many years taxpayers have authorized programs, multi-billion. I mean, it makes your head shake. Over the last few years, about 2018, 2019, 20, 21, 22, you know. And to be blunt, I've had more than a few emails over the last few years from farmers saying, you know, what is this check I just got for? You know, a lot of money has floated. It was needed in many situations. But that also tells you that our farm safety net in the Farm Bill is not living up to what it should be. And that's why it should be improved in the next Farm Bill. Plus now we're into an environment in Washington with the Republican-led House that we're back to the days of talking about deficits and debt. So now is the time to morph this into the Farm Bill rather than expect each year $7 to $10 billion ad hoc disaster program. So watch that unfold. Emergency Relief Program, Phase 1 of ERP was built off of crop insurance, and that's why eventually it was a good program. But the second phase of ERP, USDA laid an egg. I mean, it's just stupid what they're doing. That you have to look at the Schedule F and things like that. So I've heard enough from farmers. They don't want it to work. They just don't want it to work. That's my bottom line on that. For 2022 disaster, USDA said yesterday they want to finish the ERP before they really start making payments under 2022. Budget cuts, again, be aware that, as I said, the time now is how are we going to whittle down our debt of almost $32 trillion. Now, the last time this was a big issue, we had to cut $23 billion from the Farm Bill. Remember those days? You know, I'm not forecasting that at all. In fact, in the coming Farm Bill debate, we actually need more money to make that Title I safety net for farmers better. Because look at your loan rates and reference prices. They're a joke. That doesn't reflect the current reality. I'll have more on that later, and more on the deficits and debt. Impacts of the midterm elections. I've got one slide. Why did it happen the way it unfolded? Because in some quarters it was supposed to be a red wave, for the Republicans. I think that was a mistake to begin with, because the Republicans won a number of House seats the prior election. But my bottom line on why the Republicans did not do better than they did, especially in the House, is fear of Trump-type candidates won out over anger about the way the Democrats were leading the country. So that tells me, if I'm correct, which I think I am on this one, Trump is done. He will not be the Republican presidential candidate. He has lost the independent voter who gave up on him. They liked a lot of his policies, which were good, actually, by the way. But they didn't like the messenger who didn't change along with his presidency. And they're tired of it. And that's what you saw. And they didn't want a return of that with candidates who were flawed in many situations. And that's my bottom line on the midterms. The House, a modest Republican majority, 222 to 213. Senate, the Democrats retained control and actually picked up a seat, but Kirsten Sinema from Arizona switched to being an independent. She has a mind of her own. She's up for re-election in 2024. House Speaker, if you saw, of course I live politics, the unfolding drama. I watched it until 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time, the whole bitter thing. And during the process, we're talking about ailments. Don't ever pull a muscle in your kneecap, let me tell you. I did. And it's hurting. The only positive twist I can put on my muscle that'll eventually have to be repaired is that I'm not a horse. They would have killed me. Okay, you see, you've got to put positive spins on negative things. Okay, but as I was working on my knee that night, I saw the drama unfold, and just bottom line assessments on that: the 6 Republicans who got most of everything they wanted from now Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, who, by the way, comes from a very rural part of California, so that's a good thing for agriculture. They still voted president. And one of the guys, Matz, okay, said the line, "I can't think of another thing that I want from McCarthy," and yet he still voted president. That was not a good development, sad on that one. But at least we have a speaker. House Democratic leader, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from New York. He's not as liberal as outgoing Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She's not part of the leadership. I think she'll eventually announce her retirement and become the ambassador to Italy. She'll deny that until it's announced. Majority Leader is Chuck Schumer from New York, continues. Mitch McConnell continues as Minority Leader and is being hit by former President Trump. He wants him out, and a number of other hardline Republicans do as well. House Rules Package. One lawmaker can make a motion to elect a new speaker. Now, McCarthy says he's not worried about that. In fact, that was the rule before Nancy Pelosi had it changed to 5 members, by the way, because she was worried about her far left wing, the AOC types in her own party. So that's why she changed it. There's a vote, they promised them a vote on term limits. They promised them a vote on a budget resolution that balances the budget in 10 years. And part of that agreement was also to reduce the budget back to fiscal year 2022. And that's where you've seen some of the stories that if that's the case, which I don't think will be in the end result, that means a $75 billion decrease for defense expenditures, just at the time that we're going through some of the things that we've already mentioned today. It just won't happen. Not that they can't find some savings. Not to increase the debt limit without spending cuts. So sometime this summer, they're going to have the World Series of issues in Congress. You know, we're going to have the fisticuffs of what's going to go on again on this issue. And you're going to have some hardline Republicans who won't care if the government shuts down. They don't learn from lessons of the past, which tells me they want an issue and not a bill. Okay? So we're going to have to climb that hurdle in the next few months. They shouldn't bring bills to the floor until 72 hours are passed. I think that's a good rule, because I'm tired of reading 3,000-page documents in the middle of the night, of which very few people do, by the way. And then to vote on it. They have to vote on it. I mean, this should not be the way the country is run. So that's a good thing. 3 seats on the House Rules Committee for Freedom Caucus members. The Freedom Caucus members are your more conservative members, some of whom are pretty good lawmakers. Now, that's important for farm legislation. The Rules Committee is a very important committee. Reason? They help decide with the Speaker which legislation gets to the floor, and most important, which amendments are put in order to be voted on the House floor. Now, in the past, a number of far-right lawmakers have had an interesting relationship with the far left in coming after farm programs, you know, relative to sugar program. Any sugar beet producers in the audience? Raise your hand. Okay, I love sugar beet producers. This is why your associations in D.C., Luther Marquardt, he's ready, he's gearing up. He's getting his defense structure together. This is why they'll probably come after big producers who Washington thinks is bad. Big is not necessarily good to me, but it's not necessarily bad. So you got to watch the Rules Committee now of which amendments are going to be put in order. A split Congress, what does this mean? Now, most Americans like a check and balance in Washington. The Biden and White House agenda is neutered, but it's not totally defeated because he can still come out with executive orders and rules and regulations, of which he is really good at, because he learned from President Obama and President Trump. So watch that. But you're not going to have any changes in taxes. The silly thing that we went through in stepped up basis, remember, where it went pretty far, further than we thought it would, until one of the best ag lawmakers I've ever seen, Colin Peterson, stepped in and told his Democratic Party at the time how stupid it was. Okay? So you're not going to have a return to that, not with a split Congress. Jump ball, each chamber will defeat major changes from either political party. In the financial markets like that. Appropriations, defense, and other spending differences, big time. So we're finally going to have a debate, which I think is good. I think it's healthy. I'm not as negative on what has happened than many of the commentators. I come from a time when I started April 1, 1972, actually, in St. Louis, Missouri for Don't Agricultural Service. They sent me to D.C. in 78. When I first went to Washington, how a bill became a law was you discussed it at the subcommittee level, then at the committee level, it was offered to the floor, and you had a fair number of amendments from both political parties. Wouldn't you think that's the way it should be? But it's been from the top down for the last few decades, both Democrats and Republicans. And it looks like eventually we're going to go back to the old way, which again, I like. Debt increase or suspension, I've already said. That's coming up. big. Because yeah, we have to. We can't grow our way out of a $32 trillion debt any longer. Border security and immigration reform. Now, President Obama Sunday, went down and finally visited the wall. Now, some people tell me, boy, that's the biggest indication he's going to run for re-election. Because why would he have done it after not doing it for 2 years? We'll see. But we have an open border. We just have an open border. Just an unbelievable number of illegal people coming across. And we have the Farm Bill, which I'll go through later as far as bottom line stuff of what's coming up. What's going to be the Republican agenda in the House? Will they overreach? Number of investigations, and I think some needed, are going to go on. Now here we go. Afghanistan. Remember last June when we pell-mell left Afghanistan? Not that we shouldn't have eventually left Afghanistan, it was the way we did it. That gave the signal to China and to Russia that they could do things and not be called out. That was probably one of the key reasons Putin went into Ukraine. It showed a potential weakening America. Now, who came into Afghanistan about a week after we left? China. They're already beginning to harvest, if you will, all the precious minerals that Afghanistan has. Cadmium, lithium, nickel, all needed for the production of batteries. We should have stayed in Afghanistan just to be repaid for the blood of Americans and taxpayer money just to get those precious minerals, but we didn't. So we have a lack of vision in this country right now, that if we would have had the vision, we would have done what China did. COVID, I think it's a legitimate question on the origins of COVID. More than a few people think. Not only did it start in China, it could have been a fouled experiment on germ warfare, and it got out of hand. We're going to see now. We're going to see. And that's why, by the way, Dr. Fauci really retired, because he knows he's going to be called up to the hill. Justice Department. You know, former President Trump, I think, got a lot of things right. It was just the way he did it. And his comments on the dark state of the FBI, the State Department, the Justice Department, I think was accurate. They don't have to be elected, are reelected. And look at all the people that leave these FBI and Justice Department to go to work for who? CNN, you know? A number of CIA people just should be thrown in jail what they did. It's just, I'll leave it at that. Biden's family. I'm not going to comment too much on that, but it doesn't look good. So now we're going to see. We're going to see some of those records. And when you look at what Elon Musk did since buying Twitter, now we have proof that our government was lying to us. I hate to say that. I love this country. But look at what was transfolding the last few years. Sad. Economic policy, I mentioned inflation. We had an inflation report come out today, 6.5%. We had from a month to month, that's year to year, year over year. Month to month, we had actually a decrease of 0.1%, first decrease in a long time. So it looks like it has peaked. Again, that's a good thing. But inflation is not going to go away anytime soon, especially in the food price area. Interest rates, I've already talked about that. Very important to the business of agriculture because it's a financing game right now. Cash flow. Now we're back to cash flow days. Yeah? You better have cash flow because we're going to have higher interest rates. Now the easiest thing I think to do on interest rates is what's going to be the inflation rate at the end of this year. If it's 3%, remember, 6.5% now. The Fed wants it down to 2%, but most people think that we'll have about a 3% inflation rate at the end of this year. Well, the Fed's rate likes to go 2 percentage points higher. So that means at least 5% for the Fed funds rate, if not higher. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Now, connecting dots again, look at what that means to service our $32 trillion debt. Just to service the debt cost over $400 billion a year, just to service the debt. If we keep going up on interest rates, you can see the impact. Where would your farm bill be in a line of needed things if this interest rate, if this inflation is not dealt with soon? I've talked about the recession. Energy, Luke was spot on. One of the key things to watch, even in agriculture, is the role of energy policy. And I'll have a chart on that later. Parents' bills of rights. Now, I'm originally from Southern Illinois. I don't claim Illinois anymore the way it's been run. But I'm a Virginian now since the mid-70s. And a couple years ago now, I was at a Virginia cattlemen's meeting. And there was this young guy there, Glenn Youngkin, who was running for governor. He's governor of Virginia now, and I heard him give a speech. That's why it pays to go out and listen. And I thought, my goodness, he's good. Watch him. He's a spellbinder. He's not a true politician, which I like there. And there was something going on in my home county, Loudoun County. You probably remember it in the summer of a couple of years ago, where the schools in Loudoun County were teaching critical race theory. And I went to a couple of Board of Education meetings just to see what was going on. And not only Republican parents, but Democratic prone parents were up in arms about what was being taught in my county. And he caught that wave, and he said, I don't agree with the current governor who says, and he did during the debate, that the schools have a better way to teach children than the parents. So that was a salient moment. So watch the Republicans run with that over the next year. House GOP agenda, trade policy. You didn't hear squat from the Biden administration on trade policy his first 2 years. Agriculture needs more market access with our export-dependent commodities, soybeans, corn, pork, and beef. But now I'm sensing a change. Now we have finally, late last year, in the last few sessions, if not the last day, of the Congress last year, 117th, I think, they finally approved the ag officials, both at the U.S. Trade Rep's office and USDA. So now we have, and they're two very good people, and so now we have the players involved that can help deal with U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai and trying to get some new trade agreements. More on that later. Secure the border before immigration reform. 99 out of 100 people will say there's no chance we're going to have immigration reform. I usually take the other side of those types of bets. If the Democrats will change in getting some degree of border security, I think you will see more open ears on immigration reform, such as the Dreamers, all those people who came years ago. So I'm still not ruling it out. International, Ukraine. The hardest question I can't answer is what's the end zone on the Ukraine war. I just don't know what it is. But I will tell you what the people are telling me to look for. If Putin ever bombs, you know the beautiful buildings in Ukraine's Kiev that Putin holds dear to his heart. You know, they haven't been bombed. Okay? If he starts bombing those beautiful historical buildings, that means he's on the run for something very aggressive. So you have to know what to look for to be in advance. But if Putin's done away with, and there's movements in Russia on that, who's going to replace them? You know, they could be worse than Putin himself. I think it's impossible, but they could be. So we don't know. Some Republicans are saying they don't want to write a blank check to Ukraine. Because frankly, before the war, Ukraine, I'm a Catholic, and they probably had a lot of sins when they went to confession to confess. Okay? They were not at least at the government level. A lot of things undesired on there. So I think you're going to have a full-fledged debate on what's going on with the taxpayer money. China, our President Biden recently met eyeball to eyeball with Xi Jinping, China's leader, and again, I think that's a good thing. I think once you deal with in front, you can discuss some of the positives and maybe working out some of the things that could go awry. And one of them is Taiwan. I think a lot of things China does on Taiwan is just for domestic consumption in China. But if they were to ever, however they deal with Taiwan in the years ahead, just think that what that would be for U.S. agriculture trade. Yeah, we have too many eggs in China's basket right now. I don't have to tell any soybean producer that. You have an excellent soybean export council that has looked around the world and is developing to try to find a series of new markets that would total what China has bought. And I think that's a good mission to do. Debt ceiling showdown. How aggressive in using any leverage that the Republicans think that they may have. This is a chart I commented on. Debt is twice the level now than what it was when the Farm Bill had to find $23 billion in savings. That doesn't mean they're going to have to cut, but it tells you the significance of how far we've come into this debt hole. And this puts some numbers on the cost of servicing our debt. Higher rates could add another $1 trillion to interest payments this decade, besides the over $8 trillion in debt costs that the CBO projected last year. Interest rates could exceed national defense spending by 2029. Just think of that. So something has to be done. How do you do it? And the fear on crop insurance is that lawmakers like to do the easy things. They like to pick the low-hanging fruit. Crop insurance is a successful program. It's one of the best risk management tools I've seen in my career. Why is that? Revenue assurance. They had revenue assurance in the crop insurance industry before the talking Farm Bill. But it's because the crop insurance program since the year 2000 with a bill called ARPA was a shared endeavor between the government, RMA, and the private industry. That's why it's worked. Because of the innovation that I talked about before. Look how many changes that you've probably seen in your time in dealing with crop and now livestock and dairy insurance. They're the biggest growth in insurance right now in the ag sector is the LRP and in the dairy sector. State Democratic agenda, Senate, what is the Democratic leg going to do? They're going to vote on judicial nominations, including some cabinet changes. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, she was Farmer Fed chairwoman, by the way, and that's why I think our current Fed chairman, Jerome J. Powell, got too close to the White House on that. She announced the other day that Biden has asked her to stay on. I think she really wanted to leave, but now she's going to stay on. But there will be some other cabinet changes. Appropriation bills, including USDA, the House is going to mandate that our 12 appropriation bills be handled separately. And it should be. How many years have we had to wait until the end of the year and they wrap these all up in what we call an omnibus spending bill? 3,000 pages, $1.7 trillion. Nobody knows what's in the bill unless you do a search, etc. So we're going to go back to normal process. The Democrats in the Senate are going to oppose Republican-led House bills that counter their own policy. And it's limited on really what the full Senate can do because of the need for 60 votes in those cases. That's called the filibuster, and that will not change. Now, foreign policy. The next one, I always say next one because we never know whether it'll be 23, 24, or whatever. This will be the 19th Farm Bill. I have covered 11 of them. I'm sick of farm bills, okay? But they are important for the direction ahead. And so where are we at right now? Texas A&M, and you ought to get their daily report, Southern Ag Today. They're doing a good job. They take a different flavor. You always have to look at how other regions of our great country look at agriculture, and Texas A&M does that. They put out a short paper the other day, last week, that I talked about in my podcast, Signal to Noise and on AgriTalk. What if we don't get a new farm bill this year? They said, 95% of the spending in the farm bill has already been handled through other spending. Food stamp and nutrition. Crop insurance is an entitlement program. It's not married to the farm bill. They pumped out $20 billion already in more money for the conservation programs. So you can see where's the thrust here. So they're trying to say, well, the world won't come to an end if we don't have a bill. It'll just simply be extended. Just a different viewpoint. Players, G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania is the new House Ag chairman. He's a gregarious guy. I had dinner with him and his wife Penny a couple months ago somewhere I was at. And he is really wanting to get a new bill by September of this year. And he's a fair-minded lawmaker who wants to hear both sides of an issue, both political sides. And I think that does our industry well. Stamina on the Senate side announced the other day, surprisingly, the timing that she will not seek re-election in 2014. Now, why is that so important? Well, she'll want to get a new farm bill done by the time this current Congress ends in 2024. And she's got a history of getting what she wants in farm bills. So whether it'll be this year or next year, I think eventually we will have a bill. Farmer safety net is funding enough for true reform. I've already told you there was a need for the ag disaster funding, but the safety net, because the safety net didn't provide, it had a lot of holes in that net. So it's going to have to be a big discussion. Crop insurance, how do you improve it without any negative impacts? Food and nutrition. Commodity groups hate when I say this, but it's kind of easy to get a farm bill. Just get the Democrats whatever they want for food stamps. They want every dollar they possibly can. There's a reason why 20% of every dollar spent in Walmart is on food stamps expenditures. You think this is an important program within the industry? Yes. Climate smart programs. Whether you agree or disagree on the climate change debate, American taxpayers are throwing billions of dollars at this program. So take a piece of the pie. Look at some of these programs. Some of them are innovative, and this is not going to change. So look at it. Commodity Credit Corporation is the USDA's money bank, the ATM machine. But Vilsack is USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack, good guy. But he's turned wonky along with the Biden administration. No longer focused on production agriculture, to be blunt. He has really tapped the CCC for like $3 billion for this climate program, just without any legislative okay. So that'll be a farm bill debate. Dairy, marketing order, the dairy industry, I don't care what some people write. There's still disagreements within the dairy industry as far as what to do for dairy policy. But I mentioned Colin Peterson before. Before he lost his election, he really improved the dairy safety net program. And it's the best dairy safety net that I've seen. And this next farm bill will actually even add more improvements. I'll just leave dairy like that. Now, I noticed a big dairy operation coming down here, 10,000, I think, head with another potential 14,000 coming if you can get beyond the regulations, in Minnesota. And if you can't, then it'll probably go the way most things do between Minnesota and North Dakota. We'll just go to North Dakota. That's what a big oilseed processing plant did in this region when they couldn't get it through here. So your state regs are very important. Biden trade policy, I've already talked about this. Let me just go to some bottom lines. Mexico, any corn producer in this room, it's important because Mexico right now is at least signaling, Obrador, their president, that beginning in 2024, maybe 2025, he wants to ban GMO corn, especially in the food area, maybe not the feed area. Now, this is going to go on. This is not going to be settled right away. Let me tell you the real story. Their president comes from real southern Mexico. That's where your tortillas are made, primarily. That's where the food corn farmers are so important. So it's a political issue in Mexico. Obrador's term ends in 2024. So will that policy extend after he leaves office? I don't think so. But you should still be concerned because we export 10 million tons of U.S. corn each year to Mexico. 18% of food corn of that. So it's a big issue. And your corn organization is on top of that. Biden said earlier this week he met with Mexico and Canada, and he said he wanted a new trade accord, an environmental trade accord with Mexico and Canada. And Mexico told both Biden and Trudeau from Canada, their prime minister, that Mexico needs billions of dollars to boost its climate change policies and also to improve their logistics to help the United States and Canada. And I think that's going to happen. That's part, let's connect dots again. That's part of the readjusting the world that's ongoing right now, as we will never rely on China the way we did before. As Germany and other parts of Europe will never rely on Russia the way it did before on energy. So you're going to see a lot of investment money go down into sourcing into Mexico. So watch that unfold. Lack of trade accords, new trade accords, does not bode well for an export-dependent economy of the U.S. and especially agriculture. So we need some. I think a good test for the years ahead will be if and when we get a trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Why do I say that? They want one. And for the last 2 years, even with Trump couldn't get it done. And Biden didn't even want to talk about it when the UK officials he talked with. But why does UK want that in the ag sector? Their livestock producer wants your competitively priced feed. That's where some of the meal exports could go once we build up a lot of excess meal in the years ahead. Why that's important is, if and when that happens, then the UK will become more competitive in their livestock industry because of lower cost for feed, because they're having to deal with Europe feed prices right now. Then other European nations will see how better policy resulting from the US can lower some of their costs. So again, watch that over the next few years because it's an important potential development. And I always mention China and Taiwan because that's the big elephant in the room if something were to occur. RFS, I'm not going to go through all that, but I will tell you at least I will compliment EPA for finally getting a vision out for the next few years of what the level is on corn-based ethanol, on renewable diesel, even though I and others disagree that the level for renewable diesel was too low to way too low because of internal debates within the Biden administration on food versus fuel on it, but at least we know their game plan right now. And they're calling for public comments, etc., because the fundamental changes that's going on under our energy policy, and especially the RFS, are key. It's called electric cars. Now, I don't know whether they're going to be dealt with in the future primarily with batteries or hydrogen. I think the battle is underway, but it's not going to change. If you've ever ridden, my father came up through the energy business and the car business, so I love cars, okay? And this electric cars, look at where all the technology is going right now. Electric cars, trucks. Look at the design. The best designs are now electric vehicles. Yeah, do you want one on the farm? Yeah? No, not so much. But outside the farm, increasingly, you're going to get there. I looked as a history major how long it took to get, when the Model T first came out, to get that horse off the middle of the road. And it was about 20 years. And we're about 10 years into this development. So in about another decade, it's going to be there. Now, does that mean the death of corn-based ethanol? Absolutely not, because the industry is finally pivoting for the positive aspects of corn-based ethanol relative to carbon mitigation, etc. But I will debate anyone, including my very good friend Jeff Florio on AgriTalk, who's against electric cars, that this is the way the industry is going. We've already 5% of all U.S. cars are electric, and it might not sound like much, but history shows once you get to 5% of market share, the industry is ready to take off. E-brands are going to become important. Does conventional ethanol qualify for clean fuels credit? That's a question that you all ought to ask every one of your lawmakers and your corn organization because it's important. WOTUS. The Biden administration proposed new definition going back to pre-2015 definition, but updated to reflect the Supreme Court prior decision. Now, a new definition also incorporates feedback from all those listening sessions on what was originally proposed to a totally different new definition. Bottom line on WOTUS, the Supreme Court is going to come out probably in June with another declaration on the waters of the U.S. So what the Biden administration announced, it doesn't mean that much now in the short term. We're waiting on the Supreme Court. I'm not going to go through that. Agricultural research. This is a chart I don't like. Look at how much more China and Europe is spending on public agricultural research than the United States is. We shouldn't let our guard down on that. The private industry is still developing their research, but the public should do as well. So this has to change. Real quick, and then I'll open it up for questions. Senate elections in 2024, Democrats are defending at least 23 states, 3 in states won by Trump in both 2016 and 2020, and 3 states that swung between Trump and Biden. Now, the Republicans have an uncanny ability to screw up Senate elections. We saw it again this last time. As my friend David Wiesemeyer of the Cook Political Report describes it, Republicans in Senate races could screw up a 2-car funeral, you know, by the types of candidates they choose. You think they'd learn some lessons, okay? We'll see. The Republicans are defending just 10 seats, so look at that, 23 and 10. All of them in solid Republican states. So you can almost count on a Republican-led Senate after 2024. The House depends on how the Republicans govern or not govern. President, and I'll end it. I'm always asked, you know, who could run for both political parties? So here's a quick look at it. Trump on the Republican side. Trump, oh, he's already announced, but do you even remember when he announced? I mean, he's been deflated. You know, he's very frustrated right now. I just don't see him being the candidate. I get a lot of disagreements on that, but I just don't see it. He'll lose a couple early primaries. But if he does, the New York Times columnist, Jamel Bowl, said there's a real chance that Trump could run as an independent candidate. Isn't that Trump 101? You know? Yeah, he's Trump 101, thinks of himself. So that would almost guarantee a Democratic president if he would do that, because it split the vote. Ron DeSantis, the one, as the New York Post calls him. He's the one. He's probably the favorite right now of the so-called smart money in Washington, who's frequently not smart, by the way. But he outperformed Trump in every Florida county in his last governor's race last year, even won Miami-Dade County, and that's hard to win for any Republican. So he's on a roll. And primarily because of the way he dealt with COVID, that he kept the schools open from day one. Because you know why? He did the research. He saw that it didn't matter, that it mattered more to keep kids in the schools. Here's somebody to watch in the future, not only for president, but on the vice presidential ticket, Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. Do some research on this guy. He's the real deal. Very good guy, very smart, articulate, has quite a story to tell. Mike Pence, good guy, but the Trump people would defeat him just from what they think that he did by telling the truth after January 6th. I already mentioned Glenn Youngkin. He would be either a good presidential or a vice presidential candidate. I come from Virginia, and they have a lot of electoral votes. So it would be very smart to have DeSantis pick him as his vice president. Nikki Haley, former governor, good person. Ted Cruz, I don't think that he'll be the one, but you got to put him on. Mike Pompeo, is former Secretary of State, is almost too smart to become president, to be blunt. On the Democratic side, you know, Biden, will he run or will he not run? You know, when I first came to Washington many years ago, I interviewed Biden several times when he was senator for more than a few years. This is not the Biden I remember. I'll just leave it at that. It's not. He has his good days. He's a nice human being. But you've seen enough on some of the mannerisms. I just hope he's up to the task. So we'll see. By the end of the year, whether or not he announces. Pete Buttigieg, that's where the liberal media wants. He's transportation secretary. He may run for, he lives in Michigan right now. He may run eventually for the Senate seat that Stabenow will not run for. Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, I think she said the other day that she doesn't want to run for president, but we could do a lot worse. You can say what you want on Amy Klobuchar, but she knows agriculture. She has a good staff, and I think she's a fair person. if you ever want to go to bed at night, read her book on the antitrust. It's the best thing I have to a sleeping pill. Gavin Newsom, California governor. He's positioning right now. Yeah, watch him. He's smooth, suave, can get the money. You can always kind of ask this question on who runs for. Can they get the money to run? He can, okay? He's also the U-Haul Salesman of the Year from all the people leaving California. Elizabeth Warren, Gretchen Whitmer, resurrected after she got re-elected for Michigan governor. AOC will turn about a week or so before presidential election. She'll be eligible a year to become president. I will leave the country if she's our next president. And unlike the movie stars who threatened that when Trump got in, I'll actually move. Okay. J.B. Pritzker from Illinois. Bernie Sanders, you know, he wants to buy a few more $1 million homes as a socialist, okay? And my last one, and then I'll open it up for a few questions. There's one person who, if she ran, would win the presidency. And that person is Michelle Obama. The reason I say that, she won't run. If you read or listen to her book, I listen to most of my books right now because I travel so much. Her first book, by the way, Becoming. Interesting book. She's a very good family person, by the way. I liked how she brought up her two girls. She would bring back the Obama coalition, and it would make most of the liberal press go gaga all over again on Obama. So I'll never rule out anything, okay? But she could win. That's my formal presentation. I think we're running a little late. I think I had a person giving me bottom lines on the USDA reports. Well, I'm with you here. Here we go. 2022 corn crop